Hello, Jacksonites. It's been a while since I've been here, hasn't it? How long has it been? Three weeks, I think. um, June 8th. Oh, 22 days. Well, sorry for the delay on new episodes. I meant to have one out last week, but I've had a rough few weeks since me and Victoria did that video. Um, including getting sick yet again, as well as having a lot of birthday parties to celebrate because Meadow, Roman, and Victoria all have the same birthday, June 16th. So I had a lot of parties to celebrate and a lot of presents to buy and give. Oh, Andrew's already here. What's up? So, and also I wanted to, so obviously my Jurassic Park reviews aren't happening. I'm not canceling those, but they're just not really what I'm feeling right now. Um, so if you read the title, obviously, oh, Anthony Sarkis is currently in Japan. Cool. Say hello to Andres Perez if you ever find him. To commemorate two special occasions, I've decided to jump back into a certain franchise for Super Kaiju Binge. Um, Father's Day was also this month, and I asked Victoria if she could get me a certain something for Father's Day, but I didn't like demand this because I knew that this was going to be expensive. But I suggested that it would be a very nice present to get, but I didn't really expect it. Um, Today, I will be reviewing jumping back into the Gamera franchise after 2 years almost of not being in the Gamera franchise. Today, I will be reviewing the 1995 reboot to the Gamera franchise, the first of the critically acclaimed Heisei Gamera trilogy, Gamera, Guardian of the Universe. Now you might realize that this looks like a different disc compared to what I usually have, which were the Mill Creek Gamera Blu-rays released in I think 2010 or 12. Yeah, you might notice that this is a different Gamera disc. That's because Victoria surprised the ever-living shit out of me by actually coming through and getting me what I did not expect her to get me. Victoria surprised me by giving me this present for Father's Day. Holy fucking shit. Victoria got me the Arrow Gamera collection. Holy fucking shit. I was so blown away. When I pulled this out of my Father's Day gift bag, I dropped it and smashed my toe in the process. This is a big motherfucking set. This thing has to weigh at least 15 pounds. I shit you not. Yeah, I know. Cinematic Trash is here. That Arrow collection is like $400. So this set was released in 2020, I believe. And when it was up for pre-order, I was broke at the time. I had just started working at either Five Guys or Walmart. So when this was coming out, this thing was $120 for pre-order. Now, I didn't think that was so bad. It is 12 movies, thankfully. Unlike the Gamera Legacy Collection, which had all Gamera movies except Gamera the Brave. Um, uh, and that was $18, also put up by Mill Creek. This set includes all 12 Gamera movies, including Gamera the Brave, which had not gotten a release since Media Blasters in the late 2000s, I believe. More on that when I do talk about Gamera the Brave. But this is its first release since then, first Blu-ray release as well. But when this thing was released, within 2 weeks to maybe a month, this thing was out of print and cost between $400, $500, $600 fucking dollars. I really hope Victoria did not spend that much on this thing, otherwise I feel bad. But not long after that was released, Arrow also released a simplified version, which just had the Gamera movies split up into 2 sets. The Showa films for one set, and the Heisei trilogy and Gamera the Brave for the second set. Those are a bit more readily in stock, but they're still between $50 to $60 a piece. And I told Victoria, if you can get me this set, that would be great, but I would be happy with just having the simplified versions. But she pulled through and she got me this. Now, what makes this set so special? I mean, look at this thing. This is like 2 or 3 inches thick, and like I said, this thing's got to weigh at least like 15 to 20 pounds. This is part of me because this is a really fucking cool set. Obviously, here's the front cover. It features artwork done by legendary Matt Frank, the comic book artist who did all that Godzilla Neo fan art, and that got him hired on to work on a lot of IDW Godzilla comics. Most famous of all being Godzilla Rulers of Earth, which I do own. I own the whole series. This set includes this book here, which has all 12 Gamera films. This is a fucking bitchin' ass set. Gamera versus Berrigan, and Gamera versus Gauss on one disc. These are all Blu-rays. This one has Virus and Guiron. This one has Jiger, Zigra, and Super Monster on one disc. And then, of course, here we have, I took this out. Here's Guardian of the Universe. I think this is just Advent. Yeah, here it is. This is just Advent of Legion. And the final one here, well, not second to final, here's Revenge of Iris. And here is Gamera the Brave. And then here's another page. These just have cards showing off the art on all the discs and the monsters. This is some fucking bitchin' ass artwork. Like Mr. Frank, you really did outdo yourself with this set. This is fabulous. And I honestly thought that I never would get my hands on this thing. Mostly because it was just so fucking expensive. Like, I was happy just having the Criterion Godzilla set. I did not expect whatsoever to get this Arrow set. This also comes with a booklet like having little snippets of information about all 12 Gamera films. And oh yeah, here it is. A History of Gamera by Patrick Macias. It chronicles the making of Gamera, like the story of Nezera the rat monster and such. And there's little sections that talk about each Gamera movie. But this booklet also includes an interview with Noriaki Yuasa, the director of the first 8 Gamera films. And this also includes Kaiju X-rays on every single Gamera monster: Gamera, Berrigan, Gauss, Virus, Guiron, Jiger, Zigra, Queen Legion, Iris, and Zetus. And this also has a big article talking about the Heisei Gamera trilogy, written by Norman England. I think that's it. Oh wait, no, hang on. Oh, here we are. We also it ends with a guide to English language Gamera, talking about those 1980s TV cuts of the Gamera movies. So, and has some nice artwork on the back here. This is Garasharp, which was the title monster for an unmade post Gamera versus Zigra movie that Dai wanted to make, Gamera versus Garasharp. But the main reason why I was very interested in getting my hands on this set is because this set includes the Gamera Comics collection, again with artwork done by Matt Frank. So, upon the American release of Gamera Guardian of the Universe, there was a 4-issue comic series called Gamera Guardian of the Universe, released by Dark Horse Comics, um, set in the Heisei Gamera trilogy continuity, and it includes Gauss, Zigra, and Virus as villainous monsters for Gamera to fight. And it includes characters from the Heisei Gamera series. But the primary reason, the biggest reason of all that I really wanted to get my hands on this, is because this set includes The Last Hope, a fan-made comic written and illustrated by Matt Frank. He wrote it and published it in celebration of. In fact, there's an introduction here by Matt Frank himself. When 2015 rolled around, the 50th anniversary of Gamera, Matt Frank found himself very dismayed, in his words, that there wasn't much in the way of a big celebration for Gamera's milestone. Godzilla got Godzilla Final Wars for his 50th anniversary, and all Gamera got was that 3-minute long trailer, and that was it. So after 2 years of working on this comic, Matt Frank published The Last Hope as a doujinshi, a fan made comic and he released it at, I think it was at G Fest. Yeah. Um, but at some point he told his publisher in Japan, Andrew Hall, of Phase 6 about this project, and he later informed Matt that he had acquired the license for Gamera from Kadokawa and was intending to distribute the Dark Horse comics from the mid 90s for the Japanese market. And he then asked Matt to include his comic as an official bonus story. So, The Last Hope is an officially released canonical prequel comic to the Heisei Gamera trilogy. It's kind of like, it's funny how Bill Wurster was talking about when he reviewed Gamera Guardian of the Universe for Gamera Palooza, how he would like to see a sort of Last Days of Krypton type prequel comic or story detailing the final days of Atlantis set in the Heisei Gamera trilogy. And this is exactly what Bill was asking for, The Last Hope. The Last Hope details the events of the fall of Atlantis, the creation of Gauss and Gamera, and the destruction of the Atlantean civilization in canon to the Heisei Gamera series. And this answers a lot of questions that the Heisei Gamera series asked. So, yeah. It's a great read. It's not very long. It's only like a 24 page comic, but it's brilliantly written. It's brilliantly illustrated. It's in black and white, but it's oddly fitting. And it feels perfectly in line with the Heisei Gamera trilogy. Oh, and Victoria's here. Hello. Hi, bestie. So I cannot thank Victoria enough for getting me this set. Jesus, you could fucking brain somebody with this goddamn thing. It's thick. This is an awesome set. And on top of all this stuff, this set includes a shit ton of special features. It includes audio commentaries for all 12 Gamera movies. And Matt Frank himself actually does the audio commentary for Gamera Guardian of the Universe, which I did listen to. Matt Frank obviously knows his shit. So, Mr. Matt Frank, you outdid yourself with this set. Godzilla Rulers of Earth is probably my favorite of Matt Frank's overall work, but this is truly special. Obviously, the makers of this set are major Gamera fans, which is much appreciated. So, with 16 minutes talking about not even talking about the movie, let us actually get into reviewing 1995's Gamera Guardian of the Universe. Gamera Guardian of the Universe is a 1995 Japanese kaiju film directed by legendary Shizuke Kaneko and written by legendary Kazunori Ito, with special effects by Shinji Higuchi. It is the 9th installment in the Gamera franchise, serving as a hard reboot of the franchise, and it is the first of the franchise's Heisei era. It was produced by Daiei Film, Haku Hodo, and Nippon Television, and was actually distributed. Goddamn piece of shit. And of course, my light is broken. How nice. That's a nice interruption. Cool. Where did I leave off? Oh, yeah. And the movie was actually distributed by Toho Studios. Gamera Guardian of the Universe is widely seen by many people as being one of the best giant monster movies ever made, one of the best Gamera films, and is a major fan favorite amongst kaiju fans. I've seen many people say that this is either one of their favorite or their number one favorite Gamera film in the Gamera franchise. Longtime viewers of my channel will probably remember at one point in time back in 2017 or 2018, me stating that I was not a fan of this film. At one point, I did say that Gamera Guardian of the Universe is one of my least favorite kaiju films of all time. I think I was trying to be a troll back then, so shame on me. Well, as the years have gone by, I've seen this. Okay, so going into my personal history for Gamera Guardian of the Universe, I, of course, was made very aware very early on, of course, of this movie's existence. I used to read about Godzilla and Gamera movies on Wikipedia. Literally just reading the movie's plots was the greatest thing in the world to me. I just love the fuck out of it. So, coming across the Heisei Gamera trilogy, this seemed like a big breath of fresh air for the franchise, reading about it. And at one point in time, I was very, very interested in checking out the Heisei Gamera trilogy because they look like the kind of dark, gritty monster movies that I was really craving to see at the time. At that point, too, I had seen a lot of Godzilla movies that I could get my hands on through Netflix's DVD delivery service, but there wasn't that much available for the Gamera series. But after a while, I actually did manage to purchase the original Mill Creek Gamera Heisei trilogy collection, but it had a catch. It was only on Blu-ray, and I had no Blu-ray player at the time. So I actually never ended up watching that set. I ended up giving that set to my ex-girlfriend's mother because I was still close to her at the time, and she is a huge Gamera fan. I ended up watching Gamera Guardian of the Universe on YouTube of all places because I think it was Gorizard who uploaded Gamera Guardian of the Universe in full on YouTube. So I watched the movie there for the first time, and I was not impressed. This movie was not at all what I was expecting. So a few years later, when I actually had a proper Blu-ray player, I think it was a PS3, I repurchased the Gamera Heisei trilogy from Mill Creek, and I sat down and actually watched Gamera Guardian of the Universe for the second time. I think back when I attempted to do I remember. Yeah. It was during my first wave of Gamera reviews when I would just record videos on my phone. But at that point, I don't think I ever no, yeah, Guardian of the Universe was the last one that I did because my phone was dying at that point. And eventually it got so old I couldn't do videos anymore. But then I got my hands on my old laptop after taking that long hiatus. And then, so the movies again didn't really impress me at that point. But when I actually sat down and rewatched the movie and tried not to be such a huge troll, um, I liked it just a little bit more. But as I stated in my original Guardian of the Universe review with Shawnee Boy of all people, that those reviews are terrible. I did state that it's no longer one of my least favorite kaiju films, but it's still not a favorite. And now that I've seen the film 2 more times since then, no, 3 more times. Yeah, 3 more times since then, I can still say that Gamera Guardian of the Universe is not one of my favorite monster movies, nor is it one of my favorite Gamera films. I do still find this film to be quite overrated in the kaiju fan base. However, with that being said, I do think Guardian of the Universe is a good movie, and especially is it a fantastic reboot. Binging the Gamera movies, the last two, as I stated back in 2021, Gamera versus Zigra and Gamera Super Monster are two of the absolute worst monster movies ever made. Me still standing by the opinion that Gamera versus Zigra is the worst Gamera film of the whole series. So then you watch those, and then you move on to Guardian of the Universe. Man, does it feel like a massive breath of fresh air. And it was the perfect kind of course correction that the Gamera franchise desperately needed. But still, Guardian of the Universe just doesn't quite float my boat as strongly as a lot of other kaiju fans think it does. Again, I do think it's a good movie. It's very well made and it is an enjoyable film, but it's just not quite there for me. I can't quite explain why exactly, but there's just something about it that doesn't quite gel with me as much. But I'll do my best to explain as to why. So, 25 minutes into this video, let us jump into the plot of Gamera Guardian of the Universe, shall we? A ship carrying plutonium collides with a floating atoll off the eastern coast of the Philippines, one of many incidents occurring throughout the area. As the anomalous formation approaches Japan, a team of scientists led by Naoya Kusanagi discovers orichalcum amulets and a stone slab covered in Etrurian runes on the atoll. During the investigation, the atoll suddenly quakes, destroying the slab and throwing the scientists into the ocean. One member of the team, the Japan Coast Guard officer Yoshinari Yonemori, sees the eye and tusk of a giant turtle. 23 minutes into the movie. Meanwhile, ornithologist Mayumi Nagamine, yeah, investigates a village in the Goto archipelago reportedly attacked by a giant bird. While Nagamine is initially skeptical of the claims, she is horrified upon discovering human remains in a giant pile of bird shit. Exploring the nearby forest, her team encounters and then successfully prevents three bird-like creatures from attacking another village. To prevent further attacks, Nagamine agrees to aid the government in capturing the giant birds. The creatures are lured to the Fukuoka Dome baseball stadium, where two of the three are successfully captured. The last one escapes to the harbor, where it is killed by a giant turtle encountered by Yonemori and the scientists. The remaining birds escape before the turtle reaches the stadium. After translating the runes, Kusanagi explains to Yonemori and his daughter Asagi, played by Ayako Fujitani, the real-life daughter of Steven Seagal. They look absolutely nothing alike. That the giant turtle is called Gamera and the birds are Gauss. When Asagi touches one of the stone amulets, she inadvertently forms a spiritual bond with Gamera. Kusanagi also tries to convince the government that the Gauss are the real threat, but they remain focused on Gamera due to the destruction that he caused. Oh god, future Shin Godzilla seeds being planted here. Ugh. Now working together to investigate the creatures, Kusanagi, Yonemori, and Nagamine witness another Gauss attack at the Kiso mountain range. Nagamine and Yonemori are nearly killed trying to rescue a child, but Gamera arrives in time to save them and kills another Gauss, blowing it the fuck up. The last Gauss, however, escapes. Meanwhile, Asagi discovers that she suffers the same wounds and fatigue as Gamera due to their shared bond. At Mount Fuji, she witnesses a military strike against Gamera. The attack attracts the final Gauss to the scene, where it grievously wounds Gamera and forces the turtle to retreat into the ocean. Simultaneously, Asagi suffers a similar wound and passes out from the pain, getting her arm sliced open just like Gamera. Kusanagi visits his daughter at the hospital, where Asagi falls into a coma after saying that she and Gamera must rest. After consulting with a biologist, Nagamine and Yonemori learn that the Gauss are genetically engineered and reproduce asexually. They speculate on the origins and purpose of Gauss and Gamera. Nagamine suggests that Gauss were awakened by rampant pollution, and Gamera was created by an ancient civilization to combat Gauss. They approach Kusanagi with this information, explaining that the incident at Mount Fuji shows that Asagi is spiritually linked with Gamera. Kusanagi dismisses these claims until he witnesses the amulet's power himself. With Gamera recovering in the ocean, the last Gauss grows unchecked, becoming a super Gauss. The creature attacks Tokyo, causing many civilian casualties and prompting the government to focus on Gauss instead of Gamera. Attempts to kill Gauss end in failure, and it builds a nest in the ruins of the Tokyo Tower. Upon awakening from her sleep, Asagi warns the others that Gamera has recovered and will attack Gauss. Gamera catches Gauss by surprise, destroying its nest and eggs. A massive air battle ensues, and Asagi, Kusanagi, Nagamine, and Yonemori follow closely in a helicopter. Initially, Gauss overpowers Gamera, but Asagi uses her spiritual energy to revive Gamera, who kills Gauss with one fucking fireball. Kaboom. Gamera, after using his bond with Asagi to heal her, releases Asagi from their bond and returns to the sea. While Nagamine and Yonemori predict the possibility that Gauss or other threats may arise, Asagi states that Gamera will return if that happens. So, how about this plot? It's quite good. There's one aspect of it that I want to talk about as its own separate pro. You could even add the plot itself as a pro, but I'm not going to. But it's a very good plot. It's a very good creature feature. It's a very good reboot to Gamera. Um, it does justice to its IP. It does justice to the characters that it's rebooting. And it feels very fresh and new and original. Well, maybe not quite original, but the elements that it is borrowing from its past do feel fresh because of how they are executed in more modern times. Um, it also does feel like a loving tribute to its franchise's past in a good way, and in also a much more subtle way too. Um, I wouldn't necessarily call this a remake of Gamera versus Gauss, but if you do want to call it that, it's a damn solid remake. But with that being said, you might call me crazy, but I think I prefer Gamera versus Gauss over this movie. I don't quite know why. I can't quite put my finger on it. But yeah, I think I do prefer Gamera versus Gauss over this movie. Marginally. This is a good movie and a very enjoyable film. But just to me, it's not quite as impressive as a lot of other people make it out to be. So, good plot, good reboot for Gamera, and that'll actually lead me into the word from our sponsor and pro number one. This is a fantastic reboot. Gamera's Super Monster is just such an utter failure of a movie on every conceivable level. And it's no wonder why the franchise was dormant for as long as it was, and why Gamera was mocked for so long by so many people in both Japan and America. It's just a total failure. Guardian of the Universe takes the character and the most basic premise of Gamera and a giant monster movie and takes those elements and morphs them into something completely fresh and new. We hadn't really seen a lot of monster movies of this kind when this film came out. The original, or no, that the Return of Godzilla, I do prefer over this movie, but that movie is very similar in that it takes the basic premise of Godzilla, but reboots it for modern audiences. It updates it, and it takes the franchise back to its darker roots. And it's successful for that. Guardian of the Universe kind of does a rare opposite reboot thing where, unlike The Return of Godzilla, which that film, in my opinion, being potentially the very first requel, where it technically is a sequel to the original Godzilla, but it also is a reboot for the franchise in it ignoring Godzilla Raids Again all the way through Terror Mecha Godzilla. Guardian of the Universe is not like that at all. It is a complete hard reboot to the Gamera franchise. It has no ties to the Showa series. It has no ties to any previous film, and it has no ties to any of the original creators, mostly due to budgetary, kind of shady corporate bullshit on Daii's part, screwing over both Nissan Takahashi and Noriaki Yuasa out of a lot of money, but that's beside the point. This film discards all of the problems of the previous series, but it retains the core concept and does something completely fresh and new with it. Not being a remake, like I just said, you sort of could kind of say this is a remake of Gamera versus Gauss, but only taking the two monsters and them fighting each other, but that's it. This movie owes very little to its previous franchise, and it also owes very little to Godzilla. Sure, this movie was made as a response to the success of the Heisei Godzilla series, but outside of that, the Heisei Gamera trilogy doesn't owe anything to any other monster movie that came out at the time, especially Guardian of the Universe. And as I keep trying to get to, this movie does an excellent job of rebooting the franchise. It discards all of the franchise's problems. It takes the core elements and morphs it into something fresh, new, and more importantly, good. And it also does it with a great budget and great talent behind it. I want to talk about the some of the talent behind this. So, as mentioned, the film was directed by Shizuke Kaneko, who is a Japanese filmmaker who got his start in the movie studio Nikatsu. He did work in a lot of softcore porn movies for quite a long time, but he got his first tokusatsu job with Gamera Guardian of the Universe, as he is a huge Godzilla and Gamera fan, and he always wanted to work on some kind of kaiju movie, specifically a Godzilla movie. At the time, he didn't quite have the resources and connections to have that done. So then he was chosen to direct Gamera Guardian of the Universe. He would go on to direct the rest of the Heisei Gamera trilogy. And then, of course, everybody else knows him best for doing Godzilla, Mothra, and King Ghidorah, Giant Monsters All Out Attack. He also directed the two live action Japanese Death Note films in 2006. Um, and he's also worked on a couple of tokusatsu shows. In particular, he directed a few episodes of um excuse me, Ultraman Max. In one particular episode, episode 11 has some references to both Godzilla and Gamera. Um the film was written by legendary Kazunori Ito. He is a anime screenwriter and artist who is most well known for writing the 1995 Ghost in the Shell animated movie. Um, what else has he done? He also worked on what was it? Brian Yuzna's Necronomicon, Japanese and or is it Japanese? Oh, it's a French American anthology horror film. He also went on to write Gamera 2, and I don't think he fully wrote Revenge of Iris. But he's also most well known for writing the Hack franchise, a series based on a single player action role playing video game. Um, I'm not a huge fan of Ghost in the Shell, but I can see that the first Ghost in the Shell movie obviously is kind of a landmark film in anime history. And of course, the special effects were done by Shinji Higuchi, well, which I'll talk about that later. So you can just kind of feel no, I would not watch Gamera Super Monster. Hell no. Fucking A. Um, Similar kind of to Godzilla King of the Monsters, you can feel the passion and drive that the filmmakers are fans of the original Gamera series, but they could obviously tell that the franchise had a lot of problems, especially in the last couple installments. So they respectfully said, "That's not how you do it. Let me take this and then let me work on it, and then I'll show you how it's done." Which again is a massive breath of fresh air that this franchise desperately needed, which is much appreciated. So, while I prefer The Return of Godzilla as a reboot for a monster movie, Guardian of the Universe is a very close second. So yeah, this is an excellent reboot. It feels very respectful. It tries to do something new and original, which it succeeds, but it also does succeed at having just a couple nods to the franchise's past, namely with Gamera versus Gauss, with Gamera forcing Gauss to cut off one of her feet in order to escape Gamera's bite. Um, the overall I wouldn't say the overall plot, but the structure does feel sort of similar to Gamera versus Gauss. And when Gauss is killed by Gamera, like in the original Gamera versus Gauss, Gauss fires out its supersonic laser to the sky in one last time right before Gauss is fully dead. Just like in Gamera versus Gauss, when Gauss is dragged into the volcano, he fires out his supersonic laser one last time right before he dies. So you can see the references, and they don't fly off the screen nearly as much as the Return of Godzilla. Not that that's an issue for the Return of Godzilla, but that movie, obvious, like every 10 minutes, is reminding you, yeah, this is a sequel to the original Godzilla. Here's a callback to the original Godzilla. Here's another callback. Here's another one, and another one. This now again, not as a problem to that movie, but this movie does it a lot more subtly, referencing Gamera's past, which is appreciated. It allows the movie to tell its own story and allows it to distance itself from the uh, previous franchise, allowing it to come into its own. Again, which is appreciated. Pro number two, which I have 8 pros. Yeah, 8. Pro number 2 is the tone. Um, Thank fucking God. This movie is not campy, much to Noriaki Yuasa's dismay. So I don't really want to get behind a lot of the behind the scenes drama. If you want to know more, get this set and listen to Matt Frank's audio commentary for this. He goes into it a lot better than I could. But to give a brief Cliff Notes version, at some point during the early 90s, seeing the success with the Heisei Godzilla series, Dai, partnering up with Hakuhodo and Nippon Television, wanted to make it a new Gamera film to, I wouldn't say cash in, but definitely just try to get some of that 90s kaiju success. Um, And initially, Dai did want to bring back both Nissan Takahashi as its writer and Noriaki Yuasa as the film's director. And the film would have been titled Gamera versus the Phoenix. But due to Dai not really wanting to pay all of its money that it still owed to Nissan Takahashi following Gamera versus Zigra, and Noriaki Yuasa wanting to keep the Gamera franchise as a campy, kid-friendly monster movie, Dai wanted to do something different, so they just didn't coalesce. So Nissan Takahashi left the project, and soon after, Noriaki Yuasa followed, as of course, too. So yeah, they went with this movie, and I think this was a much better direction to go for the Gamera series. Because, I mean, as I made obvious in my Gamera reviews in 2021, I'm not a big fan of the Showa Gamera series. I like the first 3, and really that's it. And this is something that I also feel is very similar to Gamera versus Gauss, but in a much better way. Gamera and Gamera versus Barugan start out as being much more serious and dark monster movies. Gamera versus Gauss is kind of a mix. It takes itself seriously, but it's a lot more lighthearted and fun in its tone. This film is a bit a bit similar to that, though this movie does take itself a lot more seriously, but it still doesn't quite feel super dark in a jarring way. There are some dark subject matter that's showcased in this movie, like Gauss going around eating people, causing rampant destruction, and Gauss is treated as a serious, legit threat. Um, and there's a lot of monster gore in this. Well, not a lot, but there's some monster gore. Like, this movie takes itself a lot more seriously, but it's not quite super dark. It's not like the next 2 Gamera movies. To again quote Bill Wurster from Zanzibar, this kind of does feel like, I hate to say this, a bit like an MCU movie. It takes itself seriously, but it's more like a PG-13 family action movie. There's stuff for both kids and adults to enjoy. There's a lighter, more fun tone for kids to latch themselves onto, but the darker subject matter and the action scenes can thrill adults as well as kids. And I love that about this movie. It's an excellent balance. Better than Gamera versus Gauss, and one of the best, honestly. How well this movie balances being both serious and fun is great, in my opinion. Very few monster movies and tokusatsu shows can achieve this kind of balance. The original Ultraman comes to mind as well as having a very good mix of being dark and light. I love that about this movie. Pro number 3 is the lore that's established in this. Once again, um, in a bit of a similar way to Godzilla 2014, as mentioned in my 2014 review, I do feel that movie does take some influences from this film. It once again establishes a completely new lore and a completely new origin for Gamera and Gauss, taking the most basic um um elements from the original Gamera, with the original Gamera implying that Gamera somehow hails from the continent of Atlantis, taking that concept and expanding upon it much more, but not in a way that takes up a huge chunk of the movie, and nor does it take away from the central conflict of Gamera trying to kill these Gauss. Um, it does it in small doses all throughout the movie, and it fills you in with just enough. A lot of it kind of is conjecture and speculation, but there is stuff in the movie that firmly supports all of these theories, and you buy this new lore and new origin for Gamera and Gauss as being legit. Even looking past Matt Frank confirming all this stuff with The Last Hope, although that does even more so cement this movie's lore as being legit. But I love how it's showcased. Again, very few movies can do this right. I do feel Godzilla 2014 does exactly this in a better way for me, but I can still see this movie does it very well too. Um, the only slight issue I have with the lore, this isn't even really a lore thing, but with the characters asking, okay, why are Gauss and Gamera all of a sudden arriving now, 3, 4, 5,000 years after the destruction of Atlantis? And there's a scene when Nagamine and Yonomori are talking about, oh, well, we've polluted the world and we've kind of terraformed the planet to be in a atmosphere suitable for Gauss to arrive. They get sort of ranty and ravey about it, and there's also some stock footage of pollution in the atmosphere and in waters that just gets just to be a little bit too shoved down your throat, just barely. It's a quick scene, thankfully, but you could just kind of feel the anti-pollution messages, which is odd. According to Matt Frank, apparently Japan was quite clean at the time. It just feels a bit unnecessary. You could have just said, just conditions are right because of worldwide pollution, but they make it seem like it's just Japan's fault. That's why they're arriving in Japan. Um, just feels a bit preachy. But yeah, overall, I love this movie's lore. It's greatly expanded upon in a little bit with Advent of Legion, but especially in Revenge of Iris, it's much more greatly expanded on. And once again, of course, The Last Hope comes in and answers a lot of this movie's questions, which is nice. And that is something that this movie does that's great, that also Godzilla 2014 does as well. It does have a lot of questions, but it answers enough of them so as to where you don't feel like Prometheus or Alien Covenant. It asks a giant slew of questions about its lore, but it never answers them. It gives you enough to feel satisfied, not really needing any further explanation, at least until the sequels come along, which they do that great too. Pro number 4 is the music. Now, again, this is something I want to talk about too. The music for this film was done by, it's either Kao or Ko. Kao Otane is a Japanese film composer known for creating the soundtracks for the Heisei Gamera trilogy, Godzilla, Mothra, and King Ghidorah, Giant Monsters All Out Attack. He's also a big anime music composer. Making his debut as an anime composer in 1987 with City Hunter, which earned him recognition in the industry. And he also went on to work for stuff such as You're Under Arrest, the anime future GPX Cyber Formula, Mobile Suit Gundam Wing, as well as its movie. Um, uh, Outlaw Star, which is a series I'd like to check out. Zoids, the new Century Hero. Um, Ghost Slayers Ayashi. Arata the Legend. And he's also very well known for composing the music for the 2005 video game Shadow of the Colossus, as well as its 2018 remaster. Um, so finally, after 30 fucking years, Gamera gets his own legit badass theme. The children's Gamera theme is shit in comparison. Now, none of this movie's music is some of my all-time favorite kaiju or tokusatsu music of the entire kaiju or tokusatsu genre, but compared to Shinsuke Kikuchi's very repetitive, bland, boring-ass music of the last 3 or 4 Gamera movies, this, by comparison, is a gargantuan improvement. A lot of the music balances a mix of being serious and suspenseful and foreboding, as well as being badass, thrilling, and bombastic. And all of it has this mystical, whimsical touch to it. Maybe a little bit like John Williams. And all of it is really good. The main theme for Gamera. Dun 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 dun. Dun, dun, na, 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 na. It's pretty damn awesome. It's very fitting for Gamera, and I think that could be Gamera's equivalent to Godzilla's own dun 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 theme, of course. I could totally see if they were to ever make Godzilla versus Gamera, if Gamera and Godzilla were to come on screen, those two pieces of music would accompany the characters perfectly. Um, Not much to say about the music. I think it gets honestly a bit better in the next movie, and especially Revenge of Iris. It's actually one of the biggest pros that I can say about Revenge of Iris. Um, but here it's a very strong start. As I do feel for this overall trilogy, but it kind of teeters at the third one. But the overall trilogy, I do think, gets a very strong start, as does the music. So yeah, good on you, Mr. Kawatone. Pro number 5 is Gauss. Now again, I don't think Gauss should be considered Gamera's arch rival. I think Gauss is considered Gamera's arch rival only just by default, regardless of what, to me, regardless of what Dai says, because Gauss is the only monster that has been brought into every single Gamera continuity. Well, even then, that's a bit tricky because, well, I'll talk about that later. Um, Not counting stock footage, too. Outside of stock footage, Gauss has been in only one, two, three, four, five, well, soon to be 6 Gamera projects because Gauss is confirmed to be returning in this Gamera Rebirth series, which is the second reason why I want to do the Heisei Gamera series on Super Kaiju Binge. That and getting the Arrow set. But um, I wish it was Berrigan who was reintroduced because I still stand by. I've always felt that Berrigan is more so the antithesis to Gamera, with Berrigan being able to shoot ice, which is Gamera's weakness, and um, Gamera breathes fire, which is the anti or antithesis to ice. But whatever. Gauss is brought back in the Heisei Gamera series, and as a reintroduction and reboot to the character of Gauss, I do like a lot of stuff that they do with Gauss in this movie. It takes elements that were maybe sort of subtly hinted at in the Showa series and expands on them and modernizes them. Gauss is not just one singular monster. Gauss is an entire species, which I really like. I'm a big fan of certain monsters in kaiju and tokusatsu media being made into species. If they may there may be like weak single monsters, but as a giant species and as a horde, they could be great threats. Gauss in this movie again does feel like it was a direct inspiration for the Mutos in Godzilla 2014. As stated, one singular Muto probably is not a huge threat to Godzilla, but an entire horde of Mutos is a big problem, as would it be for the entire world in and of itself. Gauss here is very similar, although even more so. Gauss is a huge threat to both Gamera and humanity, but because Gauss reproduces asexually, also similar to Godzilla 1998, Gauss is a huge problem and a huge threat, which I love about it. And again, well, I mean, hyper or super Gauss probably is a big threat, or not a big threat, but is a legit threat to Gamera singularly. As an entire group slash swarm of Gauss going up against one Gamera, that would be one hell of a sight to behold. And we don't get to see that because of the cliffhanger ending to Revenge of Iris. Don't get me started on that. But I do like how, again, I like how Gauss is showcased. The design of which is very similar to the original Gauss, but it discards all of the original Gauss's flaws, namely the limitation of the suit, the stiff neck and stiff head, and the limited flapping abilities that the original Gauss had, giving it a much more nimble and aerodynamic design, and also ditching the vampire bat aesthetic and making the Gauss appear much more reptilian and bird-like in nature, which I also really do like. Maybe also could have been an inspiration for Rodan, but yeah, I think that's still something that's unique to Rodan, but it could be. I do like the bird-like aesthetic for the Gauss. Um, I don't like the new Gauss roar. I prefer the original screechy Chaos roar, which is used only once in this movie. The new roar just sounds too generic and basic. But overall, I do like Gauss in this movie. It's a great update and a great reimagining of Gauss as a character. But I think I do prefer the Showa Gauss only because the Showa Gauss has a much stronger personality. The Gauss in this movie are just giant monsters. They're like the xenomorphs in Alien vs Predator Requiem. They're just here to be the film's antagonistic monsters. They work as such, but that kind of makes them feel a bit more generic, in my opinion, as just rampaging giant monsters that need to be killed. That works for this version of Gauss, but that's actually one of my favorite things about the original Gauss is that he still felt like he had his own personality and was a sadistic little shit. That's one thing that did make Gauss such a good villain for Gamera. His personality was completely opposite to Gamera. But overall, though, I like the new update on Gauss, and it's a good reintroduction and reimagining of the character. Looks like a spitter. Pro number 6 is Gamera. This is an excellent update to Gamera. This is not my favorite design for Gamera, but this overall version of the character, this is badass Gamera. This is the badass Gamera that I do like. Gamera hasn't been this imposing or badass since Gamera versus Barugan, and I love it. I don't necessarily mind campy, fun, cutesy Gamera per se, but again, I like to have more of a balance for Gamera, and this movie almost does it right. The only thing that I don't dig about this Gamera is the design. It's just not quite for me. But this version of Gamera is fantastic. This is the version of Gamera that I do think would have a very good chance of putting up a good fight against Godzilla. Um, I also love Gamera's personality in this movie. And this is being the biggest difference between the Heisei Gamera and Showa Gamera. The Showa Gamera is very campy and cutesy and kid friendly and bumbly. This Gamera is much more serious, much more badass, not necessarily playful, but he does have a lot more three-dimensional character traits to him. And thankfully, due to the amazing special effects, makes Gamera feel much more like a three-dimensional, personable character, which is awesome. And I do agree that this is how you do a big badass superhero Gamera. Not like Gamera versus Guiron or Gamera versus Virus. Ultra campy, ultra kid friendly, and ultra subservient to kids. This Gamera feels like he's his own thing, and he doesn't absolutely require kids in order for him to be a badass superhero. I love that about this Gamera. Another slight problem with this version of Gamera that I have is that I've never been a big fan of Gamera only being able to shoot fireballs. I like Gamera because I like a lot of variety with monster attacks. So I would have preferred Gamera having both the ability to shoot fireballs, like having those as being his more powerful killing move. But I still would have preferred to have Gamera breathe fire. Kind of just like as a corralling or uh maiming attack. But that's kind of minor. But Gamera firing fireballs does make him feel a bit more badass. Obviously a it's an update on Gamera shooting fire, and it definitely is a stronger attack than Gamera just breathing fire. But it's cool. I do think it's a little cooler in the next movie, at least, definitely. Yeah. But overall, Gamera is awesome. His design is good, but it's mainly the update to his character that I really appreciate. Big badass force of destruction that wants to protect the world. It's awesome. Gamera is great in this movie. And also, if you do want to watch this movie for Gamera, he does have quite a bit of screen time. The atoll falls apart 22 minutes into the movie, but he appears fully 30 31 minutes fully and kills the first Gauss. Yeah, 31 minutes into the movie. And from that point on, he's on screen quite often. So that's awesome. Pro number 7 is the somewhat fun monster action. It's kind of a giveaway for one of my issues, but um when we do see the monster action, it is fun. Gamera arriving out of the ocean and killing one Gauss with just one slap is a badass sight to behold, and watching Gamera tear ass his way and make a big beeline right for the remaining two Gauss is a great sight to behold. And it's shot very well too, but I'll get to that a little later. Um, Gamera killing the second Gauss by shooting one fireball at the at the second Gauss and just blowing it the fuck up with one shot is pretty badass too. And then Gamera proceeds to save uh, a couple people from Gamera's supersonic laser as the third Gauss flies away and tries to attack. That's cool too. When the military try to attack Gamera with tanks and missiles, that's a fun scene too. But obviously, the best bit of well, kind of, but the longest bit of monster action is the final fight between Gamera and Gauss at the end of the film. It is a quite dynamic fight. There's a lot of stages to it. It starts out as a dog fight, but then they fight on the ground, and then they go up into space, and then they come back down, and the fight finishes in an oil field. There are quite a bit of stages to it, and it doesn't feel repetitive or slow. Even though I have some problems with the final fight, it is still fun and enjoyable and quite fast paced to a fault. Um, yeah, that's all I have to say. The monster action for what it is fun. And also watching Gauss go around and eating and killing people is fun too. It's kind of short, but um, still it's fun. And the final pro that I have here is the very good special effects, practically anyway. The miniature sets are very well made and they're very well detailed and constructed. They all look great at night. When Gamera is terrassing his way through, or no, not I think it's Naboya. Yeah. It looks great. It looks like a scene out of one of the early Heisei Godzilla movies. Gamera is just terrassing his way through buildings. There's lots of fire and dark skies, and smoke and explosions all over the place. It looks really good. The baseball stadium set looks very good. It's very well detailed. Um, the Gauss cave, where all the baby Gauss are nesting, and then when the characters come across that later and they discover a bunch of Gauss corpses that have been eaten and dismembered, those all look really good. It's a bit gooey and it's a bit visceral and violent and gross. And fun fact about that, all those dismembered Gauss carcasses were made with chicken bones because a whole bunch of fried chicken was given to the cast and crew for lunch, and then those bones were collected, cleaned by ants, boiled, and then used to construct all the Gauss corpses. I think it's because the budget at that point was starting to run out for the film. But hey, that's cool. It's good ingenuity, even if it is just a little gross. Um, there's lots of gooey, splattery special effects here. Well, not a lot, but there's quite a bit of gooey and splattery practical effects. When the Gauss are eating a bunch of cattle in the baseball stadium, their faces are slathered with bits of meat and some blood. That looks really good. It looks appropriately gooey and slimy, so that makes them look like real creatures. Um, when Gamera gets sliced open, it just oozes and pours this dark green blood, and it looks really good. Another minor reference to the show a Gamera series, but I think the effect looks better. Um, and also the gooeyest and gnarliest effect in this movie. Well, there's two of them actually. One is when Gauss turns into Super Gauss. As it grows, there's a lot of peeling flesh all over Gauss's body to showcase that Gauss is growing and molting like a bird. And that's gooey and slimy and fun to watch. But the gnarliest effect in this movie, oddly for me, is when Gamera arrives at the Tokyo Tower where Gauss is laying a nest, again like a bird. He fires a fireball and out tumbles these Gauss eggs. And when they crash and splatter against the ground, this purplish goo splatters all over the place. And to me, it's actually kind of shocking and gnarly. Um, Kind of reminds me of Ivan Ooze a little bit from the Power Rangers movie. But the highlight of the special effects, of course, is the Gamera suit and the Gauss suit slash puppet. Both Gamera and Gauss were showcased using both people in suits and with puppets. A lot of the Juvenile Gauss are puppets and animatronics, and they all look great. I don't really dig the design for the Gauss's face when they're juveniles. Their big, wide, white eyes just look a bit too googly and goofy for my tastes, and their mouths look a little bit too narrow and small for me. Although I think that adds itself to the bird motif, but still, I'm not a big fan. But the effects showcased are very good. There's both puppets and animatronics, and they're very well detailed. They move very well, and I buy them as being real creatures. And they're also, despite the goofy eyes, they appear as being very expressive and very personable, which is good. They kind of do have a bit of a sinister, like cunning, predatory gaze to them, which is really cool. But the best, oh wait, no, back to Gamera or back to Gauss, excuse me. The Super Gauss suit looks great. Again, a very good update to the classic Gauss design, though much more aerodynamic and much more bird-like in nature, which I like. Gauss kind of comes off as being like a giant um, reptilian harpy eagle, which I love. It has very bird-like talons on its feet, wings that look very bird-like, like an eagle, and his face and roar has a much more bird-like appearance, um, which again I really like. But it's still, again, similar to Godzilla 2014. You can take one look at Gauss and just say, "Yeah, that's Gauss." But the effects are great. The suitimation work for Gauss too. Hang on, I need a drink. I got another one. Uh, Super Gauss in this film was actually the very first kaiju to be played by a woman. Let's see, what was her name? Yumi Kaneyama. She plays Gauss in this film. Um, and she was chosen to play Gauss, coincidentally more so to showcase that Gauss seems to have a much more feminine feel and appearance, but more so specifically, she was chosen to play Gauss because she was very petite and thin, while also having experience as a stunt woman. So she was chosen purely for practical reasons, but she does do a good job for the most part. Um, Gauss moves very well when Gauss is on its feet and fighting with Gamera. The suitimation is very believable. Gauss looks and feels and flies like a real creature. Um, and the puppet effects for Super Gauss up close, I think, are really, really good. I also prefer the Super Gauss face. The mouth is still a bit thin for my taste, but it looks more like Showa Gauss. And Super Gauss also has giant red reptilian eyes, which I strongly prefer over the juvenile white googly goofy eyes, which I do not like. Um, But obviously, the highlight of the effects is Gamera. Again, not my favorite Gamera design, but is a very good update, and the effects on Gamera are stellar. Gamera is played by Naoki Manabe and Jun Suzuki. Um, I think the majority of which was done by Jun Suzuki. I could be wrong, but there was one guy that I think did do a lot more work than the other. Um, but the suit work is very well done. The Gamera costume is extremely well detailed. There was a long, arduous process that the designers of Gamera had to fight through with Dai, as they just could not come up with some kind of compromise for a design for Gamera for a long time. Gamera was designed by Mahiro Maeda, who started out his career working on the kaiju designs for Ultraman Powered, which is the only good thing you can say about that show. The designs are great. But My Hero Maeda
uh, uh,
is a huge tokusatsu and kaiju fan, and he's worked on a lot of shit over the years. But yeah, the Gamera design is good. The suit is very well made. It looks big and beefy and bulky, making Gamera look more like a imposing brick shithouse. But I think it was made to be a bit more maneuverable, and it does look like um, it was easier to wield compared to a lot of other Gamera or monster suits. Um, but there's a lot of puppet and animatronic effects done for Gamera too, aside from suitimation. A lot of close-ups on Gamera's face. Gamera is a animatronic puppet, and I really like how expressive Gamera is in this movie. I don't well, I don't mind the big expressive eyes, but I'm not an overall design of Gamera's face. It just looks a little too cutesy and cartoony for my tastes. Though that could be a minor reference to the Showa Gamera series, making Gamera look kind of cutesy and cartoony. But still, the animatronics are very good. Gamera's mouth opens and closes very well. His eyes and his eyelids are very articulate and expressive. And Gamera's body language is also very easy to read and very expressive as well. Um, the best scene of which is when Gamera um, heals Asagi's wounds and breaks his connection. There's a scene where he's like looking down kind of, but as soon as you can kind of tell the connection is severed, he kind of like bows his head, closes his eyes, and roars to the sky as a like a thank you to Asagi for helping him destroy Super Gauss. Um, and that, of course, being the biggest showcase of showing that Gamera is a fully 3D character in this movie. He's not just a kitschy, kid friendly, campy big gun. He's a big, badass, three-dimensional character, and I love it. The effects are great. Do I think that the effects are as good as some of the Heisei and Millennium Godzilla movies? As good, maybe. Better? Nah. Well, nah, I don't really think so. I think it's just because I have a bigger connection to Godzilla. But the effects in this movie are still very, very impressive. A lot of money went into this. A lot of legit big budget money went into this movie, and it shows. So, with all these good things to say about Guardian of the Universe, I have three mixed elements and I have four cons. Mixed element number one, I do think this film is a bit too short. And this has to do with the pacing of the film being mixed element number two. I think the film is actually paced too quickly. Because it's so short and because I think this movie moves so quickly, there's never really a moment to sit back and breathe. Like there's really no suspense, or at least there's barely any when Gauss are going around killing people. It begins with the Gauss attacking people, and then they're discovered, then they're captured, then Gamera shows up, then Gamera kills a couple Gauss, or kills the one Gauss, then Gamera is attacked, and then Gauss is attacked, and then Gamera and Gauss fight at the very end of movie. It's a very quickly paced film, and I don't think that really works for this. I think it should have taken a couple moments here and there to breathe and take its time. which is something I think the next movie does better than this film. It's only 5 minutes longer than this movie, but I think it needed that extra 5 minutes. So yeah, call me crazy, but I think this movie is too short and too quickly paced. But the biggest mixed element for me, this is going to be controversial, I know. I think the human cast is purely functional, similar to Godzilla 2014.
Uh,
None of the characters are bad, and none of them give bad performances. They're all very well written. They act their characters very well. They have good chemistry, and they're likable and lighthearted. But I just don't really feel any connection to any of the characters, really. There's actually a couple characters that I really dislike. This big fan favorite character, Inspector Osako, I think that's his name. Or no, Osako. Inspector. What the hell is her name? Oh, I was right. Inspector Osako. I actually do not like him. I find him to be quite obnoxious and annoying. Um, his cameo in the next movie I do think is funny, but I'm just not a fan of this character overall. Call me crazy. I know everybody loves this guy, but I don't. But out oh, and there's one character too. Um Hirotaro Honda as Masaki Saito, Deputy Director General of the Japan Environment Agency. He's the guy who wants the government to focus on Gamera as the threat. Oh, I hate this guy. I don't hate just this guy. I hate this kind of character's archetype. The one who always has to be a stick in the mud. This is one thing that um Godzilla 2014 does better than this movie, because I think this character's equivalent could be Admiral Stenz. Unlike this guy, though, Admiral Stenz isn't necessarily anti Godzilla, but his objective is to save lives. And whether or not the characters want, because he views both Godzilla and the Mutos as threats, he hasn't quite learned that Godzilla is pro Earth. This guy here is just anti Gamera from day one, very ignorantly and frustratingly so. God, this is really making me dread Shin Godzilla. Ugh. And it's making me dread Gamera 3 Revenge of Iris. I don't think he's in the second movie, but he has a much larger role in Revenge of Iris, and I am so dreading it. And while he's not in Gamera the Brave, he does have there is a character that is very similar to him in Gamera the Brave, and I'm not looking forward to that either. But the main trio, or not trio, but the main group of protagonists, I just think they're serviceable. They all give good performances, they're well written, and they're likable, and they have good chemistry. They just don't really connect to me very strongly. Sorry. Um, with all that being said, I have four cons. Two of them are involving the effects, and the other two involve the monsters. Con number one is that there is some bad CG and there's some really bad green screen and composite shots. There's not a lot of CG, thankfully. In fact, I think there's only 3 shots in the whole movie that uses CG. And the first two is when has a whole bunch of either bombs or missiles shot at him at night. All of the missiles are like PS1 level CGI graphics, and they look terrible and they stick out like a sore thumb compared to the rest of these excellent practical effects. And the second shot is when a bunch of missiles are fired at Gauss during the daytime when Tokyo Tower gets destroyed. Those aren't they're not as noticeably bad as the missiles that were fired at Gamera, but you can clearly tell they were CG models on a still background being composited across this background, and it looks pretty awful. But the biggest effect flaw in this movie is the green screen and composite shot. Oh, the third CG shot when Gauss fires his laser at Gamera's head, he gets his cheek cut, and you see green blood splurt out all over the place. It's green CG blood, and it looks bad. It sticks out like a sore thumb. That's a very quick shot, though, so I kind of let that one slide, but it does stick out like a sore thumb. But the green screen and composite shots in this movie are just awful. And I don't get why they did this because there are shots when Gauss and Gamera that's what they're mainly used for is when Gauss and Gamera are in flight. But they have shots where Gamera and Gauss are flying that they don't use composite shots. I think they have either puppets or animatronics on strings and they're just flying around. Those look fine. Those look really good, actually. But there's a lot of shots where they composite these uh, Gauss and Gamera props against a green screen and they just look terrible. They stick out like a sore thumb and they jump back and forth between the good flying shots and the composited flying shots, and it's very jarring. But unfortunately, I think they mainly focused on those shitty composite shots, and that is a huge pet peeve of mine. They just look absolutely awful. And they stick out like a sore thumb, and they're so jarring. So that's the weakest effect in this movie, in my opinion. Con number 3 is the monster action is quite short. They keep it. There's lots of monster scenes, but they're all very short and they're all very rushed, in my opinion. And that's I want to see Gamera. I want to see Gauss. I want to see them fight. But every single time that the monsters are on screen, it's quite brief. And even the final fight between Gamera and Gauss, they keep cutting back and forth between well, they do this all the time too, but in my opinion, they cut back and forth way too much between the monsters and the humans. I just want to see Gamera and Gauss tear each other to pieces. But I don't even get to see that because con number 4, the biggest problem with this movie, because in my opinion, I wouldn't even count the rest of the monster scenes as fights, as they're more so just Gamera kills the first Gauss, he gets to the baseball stadium, then they fly away. He blows up the second Gauss and protects kids from another. I wouldn't count those as fights. There's really only one full-on monster fight between Gamera and Gauss at the end of the movie. And I think it's quite poor, honestly. When they're fighting in the air, even despite the shitty effects, that's fine because it's kind of similar to the original Gamera versus Gauss. They're two flying kaiju, but they still showcase Gamera is like a big giant rocket, whereas Gauss is a much more much more agile speedster. They do bring that over into this movie, so I like those differences. But when they're fighting on the ground, the fight between Gamera and Gauss is terrible. They just spend the whole time. Gauss is just flailing and waving her wings around slowly, and Gamera just keeps dodging slowly Gauss's wings and just nudges her along with his head and pushes him with her shoulder, or pushes her with his shoulder. It is so lame and it's so piss poor in my opinion. When Gauss flies up and tries clawing at Gamera with her talons, that's a little bit better. That again plays up the bird-like motifs, but I do not like the final monster fight between Gamera and Gauss. How Gamera kills Gauss is really cool too, and I like the little reference with Gauss's laser at the very end. But yeah, I don't think the monster fights are very good, sadly. The next movie improves on them quite a bit, but then the third one makes it even worse. But that's my biggest issue with this film overall is that I think the monster fights are too short and quite poor. So with all that being said, um final thoughts on Gamera Guardian of the Universe. It is a good movie. It's a great reboot for Gamera, and it's a very well made, very well done monster movie and reboot. But I just don't really know how to put my finger on it, but for some reason, this one doesn't quite do it for me as much as other Gamera films or other kaiju films. I can see that this movie is well made, and I recognize that it's a good film and a very good reboot, but for some reason, I just don't connect to this film very strongly. But I don't think that it's one of my least favorite monster movies, and I don't think it's one of my least favorite Gamera films, but I do think that it is overrated. Not as much as I used to, but still quite overrated. So that's why I will be giving Gamera Guardian of the Universe a respectable 7 out of 10. Good movie, but I think I prefer the original Gamera versus Gauss. Marginally, still though. So thank you all for watching. I'm happy to be back in the Gamera franchise. This will be a lot of fun. And tune in next time when we tackle my favorite Gamera film of the whole series. I shit you not. Not even remotely burying the lead with that one. When we talk about 1996's Gamera 2 Advent of Legion. Oh, hell yes. I am so excited for that. Post your comments down below and let me know what you think. Hit the like button and hit the subscribe button and share this video with your friends. And as always, go out and watch some good monster movies. And if you hear an ominous reptilian screeching noise, you might want to run and hide. Or just let a giant turtle come along and kill it. And I will see you guys in the next video.